Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Step into the Pivot. We are so happy to have you join us. And today we are joined, I know, by somebody who listens to our podcast regularly, so that excites us. But Kevin Spaeth, Kevin, welcome. We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So Evie and I've known Kevin for quite a few years, and I believe Evie has as well. So this is a definitely a friendly guest for us. Not that all of our guests are friendly, because they definitely are, but I honestly, like I say a lot of times, I don't really know what we're going to talk about today, what Kevin's big pivot is. So Evie, do you want to kind of set the stage for us a little bit?
Yes, Kevin, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us about your story. And also, thank you on behalf of a couple different organizations in the financial services industry, retirement industry in particular, for your contributions as an ally. Sometimes Teresa and I on this show talk about being the only woman in the room. And you have been the only guy in the room on more than one occasion. And that is how we got to know you really well because you're a dedicated ally. You really do so much through a variety of different means to lift people in our industry up and to very specifically show how it's important to be there for each other and particularly for issues that pertain to diversity. And it's just thank you. This is a little plug um, for you right here because we feel passionate about saying thank you to the allies without whom some of these important works would not be happening. And that was a really good opening to our story about you because you actually were starting to tell me you and I were sharing a meal and you started to tell me about your mom and there you were again in an ally position. You talked about her with a lot of gratitude and with so much love and understanding for her position, but it turns out that there was something that you lived through together as a family that was really um it deeply shaped you in every way across all the bodies. So, tongue-in-cheek way to set up the pivot is to ask you, Kevin, to tell us how come the state of New Jersey has a bike helmet law in place? Is
Oh, the
that
New
a
Jersey bike helmet law.
yes?
All right. So, when people see me and notice me, one of the things they notice about me is my smile, and they say, "Oh, Kevin's got a really great smile," and I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And I'm like, "It's really two distinct things." When I was the summer of my 13th year, it was about a month after my 13th birthday. I actually had four teeth pulled. They were it was just a genetic thing. We have big teeth. It comes from my mom's side of the family. And I had four teeth pulled. And it was on a Monday, and I had 12 needles inserted into my gums, and it was so painful. I couldn't believe anything. I don't know how bad pulling four teeth would be, but I couldn't believe it'd be much more painful than 12 needles. So the next week, so I was on a Monday. And then the following Monday, I go back and the dentist removes the stitches. Not that painful, especially not compared to 12 needles. Then the next day after that, my mom actually went to the same dentist um, that day. And then that night, my friend called me up and said, "Hey, Kevin, do you want to go see Who Framed Roger Rabbit?" And I'm like, "Oh, of course, yeah." I'm like, "But I've got to actually go collect from my paper route in order to pay for the movie." So most of the stops on my paper route were in my neighborhood, but there was one that was on the main street. And coming home from that, I went and picked up the dues from that. I'm riding my bike on the way home, and then out of nowhere, my dentist comes and hits me with his car. And I crash my head through the windshield. I go flying in through the air and land like 30 feet away. And one of the things that happened that saved my life that day was that the house I landed in front of was my friend's house, and his mom was actually an ER nurse. And one of the other things was that my dentist actually went to medical school with one of the best brain surgeons in the state of New Jersey. So what happened to me was that I actually had what's called a subdural hematoma, which meant a blood vessel had burst in my head and my brain was drowning in its own blood. So I was rushed to the hospital, and they had to they ended up having to perform surgery on me. They shave my head, cut through my skull, and fix the blood vessel in my brain to prevent my brain from drowning in its own blood. And at the time, uh, that my uncle was actually, so this was 88. My uncle was actually a congressman from the state of New Jersey. He would later become the governor of New Jersey the following year. And he had helped push through, after that happened, he had just said, no, we're not going to do this. He had helped push through laws, the helmet law to allow for helmets all children under the age of 16 have to wear a helmet in the state of New Jersey. So the two things why I have a nice smile is one, my dentist hit me with a car, and two, I ended up taking my orthodontist daughter to senior prom. Uh, and it just so happened that it was my orthodontist daughter. We became friends, and this was like years after I got my braces off. But I like to joke around about that.
Well,
Yeah. So
I was gonna say that we should put a little disclaimer if you're afraid of the dentist, right? When you started talking about all the needles, but the rest of the story is just so crazy. I mean, you're so lucky, right? Clearly, you're meant to be on this earth because you're so lucky that there was an ER nurse and the dentist knew something and they saved you. But the fact that the helmet law is so I think such an important thing, and that was probably back in the day where a lot of states didn't have helmet laws.
no, I mean, this was only a few years after the seatbelt law came into effect. So, I remember a couple of years before that, we didn't have to wear seatbelts. And when all of a sudden seatbelts were mandated, about how everybody was up in arms about that. And then, years later, everybody was up in arms about having to wear helmets while riding a bike. But I'm sure it saved a lot of people's lives, and I'm happy for that.
I'm sure it did.
So if we're looking back, all of this happened to you within well, like what was it, less than a month, a couple of weeks, right? Because, we, of course, it's, uncanny that the person who, was driving that car was your dentist. But if I'm just thinking about what you've been through, that, span of those few weeks, I mean, there was first the huge experience of pain with the oral surgery.
Mhm.
And then only you know, do I have that right? That it's like just a couple of weeks? Is that what you said?
It,
Like a
it, it
week,
was
maybe
it,
even,
it
or
was
one
eight
week, right?
days.
8 days,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So are you open to telling us about what the healing journey was like? I was blessed to see a picture of you and your mom in the hospital, I believe, and or maybe you're at home at that point, but you're convalescing. You're in the middle of the healing. You're clearly doing better. But there's this look on your guys' faces that just tells the whole story about like what an immense journey you were on.
yeah. It was really difficult. So. I was in a coma for maybe 4 days. I was in the intensive care for about 10 days, and in the hospital for about 2 weeks total. And after that, getting out, it was pretty difficult. And being just having turned 13 literally the month before, and being a teenager and going through all of that, it was a difficult recovery because of that emotionally, I think. And so I had my so right around my 13th birthday, my brother was a lifeguard at Seabright Public Beach on the Jersey Shore, and he had forcibly dyed my hair bleach blonde. Like he just d dumped a bunch of peroxide in my hair and said, "You better go wash that in, or it's gonna look really funny." And I'm like, "How am I gonna grow this out, without looking, completely foolish?" Well, it turns out the easiest way to do that is have brain surgery and have your head shaved. But so I had a scar going across my head, and kids, teenagers, eighth graders aren't really can't always be the nicest people. So a lot of my classmates call me tennis ball head, and kind of made me like a bit of an outcast, not a bit of a really an outcast in eighth grade at a time when we're going through all these changes. So that was really difficult, really emotionally difficult for me. And one of the things that really got me through that was the love of my family, the love of my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister, and constantly being there for me, at all times, and the overall love of all my family. Because growing up in New Jersey, I grew up about 5 miles from where my dad grew up. And I think right now, if you look at it, like 23 cousins in the state of New Jersey out of 26 total. So it was a really a very close, tight-knit group, just all growing up together. Like really, that's what got me through it is the love of my family unit and my extended family, and my mom and dad constantly being there for me.
Yeah, I love that because I grew up in Pennsylvania and I had a similar situation, right? My grandparents like lived like here and all the daughters lived within, so you get to grow up with your grandparents and your cousins and they are they're your family, right? Like they're there to support you. So I love that part of your story, Kevin.
Yeah, like my
So,
brother and sister are 8 and 9 years older than me,
oh,
but my cousins, the Hogan twins are like 2 years older than me, and they lived like 5 miles or 10 miles away. So I actually spent more time with them and was closer to them than really my brother and
yeah,
my sister at the time. And my other cousins, my cousin Noni is 3 months and 3 days younger than me, and we would see her. She was about 40 minutes away, but we'd see them monthly, basically.
yeah.
So really, growing up, I can say I have one brother and one sister, but really, I've got 23 brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and I love that too. Like, and even though I'm not super close with them, but I do reach out to them. We do talk, we do see each other, fairly regularly. And so it's just one of those relationships that they were like your siblings, honestly.
Yeah. I can see
Were you
how
gonna say
that
something else?
was,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was thinking how that, when you're talking about that cruelty that you experienced at school, and kids, it's not like they know what they're doing when they're making those awful comments. And there's just, so much going on for everybody during that time, and they pick up some of these behaviors also elsewhere, right?
Yeah, and I think you're
Um,
just not as self-aware
yeah,
or as aware of your actions and how they affect other people. I don't think you have the empathy.
yeah,
And that's one of the things that was really one of my aha moments and one of my pivots was that the amount of empathy I developed because of what I went through that year and being able to see what I see in other people kind of was what I really developed from that. And one of my favorite presidents is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And you think about him, and he is a patrician. He grew up in one of the first families of America. And during the Great Depression, he felt so much for the average American because of what he had went through, going through, being struck with polio in adulthood and the struggles he had to go through that. That's kind of what endowed this person that was given everything in life, but during his presidency, gave back to, cared about every person in every strata of society in America and helped lift up everybody in America, helped to try to lift up everybody in America through the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps and all those programs.
yeah. And when I'm thinking about my opening comments, we definitely see, some of those same values and principles in how you show up in the industry and how you show up for the people around you. I know you do also do a lot of volunteer work, and you just look for ways to give. And sometimes, you make it look very easy. But I know that, when we get to know you, right, there are all these deeper layers. And one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about your family, how it seemed to me how that it was really beneficial also from a social standpoint to have this larger group of family members, how you were describing your cousins, and it just to offset some of the social cruelties that you were experiencing. And I'm just thinking about how we end up impacting each other in all kinds of ways with the words we say, with the glances we give, with the actions we take, and how that can have a ripple effect much bigger than the individual moment, for better and for worse.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is that ripple effect, and that what they say, the butterfly effect, with the butterfly flapping their wings and causing a tsunami on the other side of the world. A lot of times you don't think about that, how what could be an offhanded comment to you could be something completely, could be taken and developed into something a lot bigger for other people.
Yeah. And that really to me, right, it that whole experience probably moved you forward. Like move us forward in that timeline and how that really, how you really feel that that affected like your personal growth, right? Your emotional journey kind of in this, right? Do you think, I mean, clearly there's no lasting effects, which is amazing, but how do you think that affected you? I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, but are there other things you could bring up or talk about?
Um, so one of the lasting effects was it kind of brought me a lot more inward and made me a lot more, I dropped out of a lot of things. I stopped playing guitar. I kind of dropped out of scouts, and started reading a lot. And that's another thing I get from my parents is the love of reading. So if people are like, oh wow, Kevin really knows a lot of random facts. A lot of it is because of after that I became a massive reader and just would devour books, and still I do to this day. And I think that's one of the things that really came from that. Um, Another one was my kind of view on life and the fact that you have to kind of prize every day you have, because you don't know how many days you have left. You don't know when you can just when something can be happening. When you can be your dentist can hit you with a car a day after taking out your stitches a couple of hours after seeing your mom. You don't know what can happen, so you need to really cherish every day that you have in life.
Yeah,
And
I always love to say tomorrow's not promised, right? You have to live for today. So I love that you talked about that for sure.
yeah, and then now that I've living up in the Pacific Northwest, I really embrace the you've got to make hay while the sun shines. Spending most of my adult life in Southern California, you kind of get used to the fact that every day is 77 and sunny. But here it's going to be a gorgeous day today, and now with that, you're like, oh my God, I got to get out. I got to enjoy this day because tomorrow it could be rain. But today there's sun.
I'm taking notes here because, sometimes we listen for what the guest will say that will then essentially summarize what we're talking about and potentially even make for a good title. And honestly, for me, this is what then ends up lifting me up during the day. So make hay while the sun shines. Just such a lovely message. And how do you see yourself implementing that and sharing that further inside your family? Because we know you're a family man now, parent yourself.
Yeah, I can't believe it. My son turns 14 on Saturday. And they kind of know the deal that like if it's nice out, Dad's gonna get him outside. We're gonna jump in the car, we're gonna go somewhere, we're gonna do something. And even I try to do that when it's not nice outside. We're members of the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, kind of or and urban air. We kind of try to get out and do things like that and really enjoy it. And one of the things I hate to be the guy that says kids these days, but with kids, a lot of times with children, you don't see them as much play based as they used to be, and you don't see them outside the way that they used to be. So I try to make sure that you can have your devices, you can do this, but we're going to go out, we're going to enjoy this, we're going to do this, we're going to ride out to the coast, we're going to go up to Mount St. Helens or Mount Hood, we're going to go out and seize this day while we can.
I wanted to ask you, did you get back on the bike? And what was that like? If you did or if you didn't?
I did get back on the bike. I did. I I ended up getting back on a different bike. It was a much heavier bike. It was actually my dad's old bike, so it was made of steel, and it was difficult to ride for a little while. But then it actually improved me, and then I became a mountain biker after that. But that also kind of shaped one of my philosophies in life is that you know um, it's all right to be afraid and to be scared of things. But it's not all right to allow that fear to control your life. It's you can be naturally afraid of something, but if you try to play out the odds, like if it's an irrational fear, don't let that stop things. If it's a rational fear, by all means, don't do it. But like if it's an irrational fear, don't let you stop that. One of the things I think of is I'm deathly afraid of sharks. Uh, really afraid of sharks. But I never let that stop me from going in the ocean because I realized that, that what the chances of a shark attack are minimal, are almost nil. The last fatal shark attack in New Jersey was 1917. So even though I was afraid of being in the ocean, of being bitten by a shark, I knew the fact that it had been, 80, 90 years since somebody in New Jersey was fatally killed by a shark.
Yeah, we can't, I think your point is right on. You can't live your life in fear of everything, right? I'm sure when you got back on that bike now, you had a helmet on. I'm sure when you mountain bike now, you have a helmet on, right?
Yeah,
Right. So, because there's some things you can control there, and that's true about life. I mean, that's really true about life sometimes. And sometimes, the things you branch out on give you the best unexpected return. You never
Mm,
know, what that's going to look like. So I think that's a
yeah.
really great message.
I
yeah,
love this as a combo of this, like, so it's a paradox. On the one hand, you learned the lesson to prize every day because you don't know what's going to happen. Because something really strange and statistically very improbable might indeed happen. So that's why you're here in the hot seat. Like you're in the pivot seat because you're like, no, you won't believe what happened to me. Like, what are the chances that
yeah.
like, what are the chances? So you have that lesson down like that. And then that takes you into a place of cherishing every day. At the same time, you can't live your life from a place of fear because you could have, Kevin, made a choice for good reasons back then that like, okay, now I'm not going to go anywhere, do nothing, and I'm just going to, keep protecting myself and take yourself out of the game. And on the contrary, you did the opposite. You, in many meaningful ways, continued to, put yourself out there. And so I think I like this because it's like it's a joint lesson. It's both of these things at the same time because you're like, what are the odds that the shark will attack me? Very low. So I'm gonna go into the ocean. I feel like
Exactly.
those
Wait,
two key
I'm
things go
listening to you.
together.
Wait 1 second.
Oh, it's totally fine.
Sorry about that. Bub,
It's
come.
okay.
Bub, what?
We can cut this. We can have this cut out. So that's no problem at
Bloopers
all.
are the best.
Yeah, bloopers are the best.
I don't know
Who's
why he's
with us?
barking so much. Usually it's just
Oh,
Eli at the office, but he's continuing to bark now. Bub,
or
here.
maybe he
Come
wants to say something important. Of animals and animal life. And
I've got a hyperactive 14-year-old Pomeranian. Bub, what is it? No, that's recording.
that is so sweet. That is so
Ah,
sweet. For I often use at the center when I work with individuals, we use the metaphors of talking to our fearful selves the same way you just talk to your Pomeranian. What's going on? Hey, I see that like I know you're afraid, but it's okay. Like come over here. Stop. And you both give it attention, but you also contain it. Like you're doing it exactly right now. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
So Bub is 14 now, and he is going through he is going through heart failure, and we don't know how much longer we have with him, so we try to enjoy every day of this. And when he originally got the diagnosis, we thought it was I thought it was like days or weeks. I wasn't even sure if he was coming back from the vet when we would bring him in. So I've been doing little days with Bub where we'll go on a road trip. And like we saw the king tides out on the Oregon coast this year. We went to the waterfall corridor. And Kaylee, my wife, one of her friends is a veterinarian, and she's like, I was talking to Amanda, and she says, you really shouldn't be taking Bub for these long walks with congestive heart failure. I'm like, I kind of take Bub for short walks, but long carries because
yeah.
he's like a very small dog. So like, we hiked Powell Butte together, and really, the majority of that was me just having him in my hand, having him in my arms, walking up to the top of the butte.
Well, and maybe he's doing so well because you're bringing him some happiness there at the end of his life. I just wrote a series about happiness and how, being outside and being in nature can do that. And if it's true for humans, there's nobody can convince me it's not true for animals. So
Oh,
yeah, I think that's amazing. And just, you talked about your son and doing, trips and stuff with him, especially for his birthday. And I think that makes such a connection and adds so much to everybody's life. So Kevin, that's a fantastic thing. I think I'd like to ask you in summary, right? Can you maybe summarize how this event, is a pivot for you and how that made you take that step forward? I think you told us, but I'd love to have you kind of summarize it for us a little.
sure. So I think the biggest thing I took from that was it strengthened the bond I had with my family that was strong already. It gave me more empathy into other people because you never know what other people are going through, and it also had me just make sure that I enjoyed every day. And I grabbed as much of the day as I could, and that's something that I've really carried with me throughout my life.
Awesome.
And also, I
Awesome.
always cheer for the underdog. Unless it's baseball, then I cheer for the Yankees.
I love that. Well, thank you, Kevin, for being on. We really appreciate it. Evie, do you have any last comments, any last thoughts
Yes,
there?
beautiful summary, Kevin. Beautiful summary. I think those are some really key bullet points, essentially, that we really want our listeners to be inspired by. So appreciate you greatly, and thank you for, being willing to visit some of these old painful places, in the interest of sharing your message and carrying hope.
Yeah, and as long as you live through things that and just try to take what you can from them, even if it's a bad thing, just what can you learn? How can you move forward with that? Don't just ignore your past, but learn and grow from it.
Yeah. An awesome wrap up. Thank you so much, Kevin. Our guest today was Kevin Spaeth. So thank you again, Kevin, for being on, for sharing your story, for being such a great part of Step Into the Pivot, and for being a listener. So we love that too.
And
Thank
also, Bub.
Oh, and Bub. I can't forget Bub for sure. So we're happy to have him on as well. So thank you for that. To our listeners, thank you for being here. We will be back in a couple weeks with a new episode. And remember, until then, if you have a pivot, step into it.